Hi, ladies. Oh, okay. Hope everyone is doing well. So, as we know, the theme for today's conference is breaking barriers. And we have Krista here who's going to be a keynote speaker, and she's going to take us through her point of view when it does come to challenging the status quo, especially as women, and dig a little deeper into how we can overcome challenges. I've personally had the pleasure of being colleagues with Krista, and I'm always in so much awe and honestly inspired when I hear her story to leadership. So I can't wait to hear the gems that she has for us today. But before we hand it over to Krista, I'd like to let you all know a little bit about her. She is the vice president and general manager for Synergy One View at Hewlett Packard Enterprises Hybrid IT Group. In this role, Krista has global operations P&L responsibilities for a multi-billion-dollar business at Hewlett Packard Enterprise. Krista is responsible for the development of the business strategy, go-to-market execution, and resource allocation. Krista has over 20 years of industry experience in product management, marketing research, and sales in the technology and consumer goods industry. She has held numerous positions, including the first product manager on Blade servers, responsible for defining and managing world's best-selling server Blade. Krista also drove a transition in an HPE startup business from a product go-to-market to a solution go-to-market team and launched solutions to fit customer needs. She began her career at HPE in 1997. She holds a Bachelor's of Science in Business Administration from the University of Illinois in Chicago and an MBA from the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign. One last thing for housekeeping items. We would have about 15, 20 minutes at the end for questions from the audience. So if you do have questions, do post them in the questions section and you could have your name beside your question as well. And I'll get that to Krista and she'll try to answer those as much as possible. Krista, over to you. Thank you.
So thank you so much for joining today. I asked, I said, are most people joining because they must join or they really want to join? So kudos to you. I know a lot of you are joining because you're just taking your time to learn a little bit more about potentially what you want to do in a career and then how you would break through barriers as you try to succeed in your career. So that's what we'll talk about today. So I'll start off by saying, first of all, acknowledging what's going on in this country when it comes to the protests that are going on. My thought on this is that it has been a problem. It is a problem, and it's been a problem for a really, really long time. I know personally I've been affected by this. I have a grown son, and he's had multiple instances where he was targeted because of the color of his skin. And I don't know many African American men in my life that haven't been profiled and harassed unnecessarily because of the color of their skin. So I know it's real. We catch only a handful of these on video. There's many, many more behind those. And I will say I'm hopeful. I'm really hopeful when I see the amount of diversity that's out there in the protests. I'm hopeful when I see the youth out there in the protest. I mean, I think it's your generation is a generation that's, will stand up for what's right, which I'm very hopeful about. And I'll also say I'm hopeful because I see a lot of people. I do understand that this challenge is not visible to everyone. Um, if you've never experienced it yourself, it's really hard to understand that it actually happens. And to a lot of people, it doesn't make sense, but it happens every day. I know that. But some people don't realize it. So what I see is a lot of people trying to educate themselves on the matter. And I'm hopeful about that. And then at my workplace, Hewlett Packard Enterprise, we're actually talking about this for the first time that I could ever remember really broadly. So I'll say that earlier this week, I actually had a Zoom call, several of us did, with the CEO of our company who wanted to hear our thoughts as African American employees. And so I'm hearing, I'm talking about it more. I talked about it in my staff, and a couple of the people on my team thanked me privately for bringing it up and sharing my story because again, I know it's not obvious to everyone what's happening, and people see these videos and they may think they're isolated incidents. They're not isolated incidents. The rate at which, particularly African American men, sometimes women, are targeted, and I'll say this: it's really it happens to Hispanics. It happens a lot of time Middle Eastern. It's really, it's really a rampant problem, and we need some change. So I'm hopeful that there's going to be change because of this, and I'm excited by how much energy a lot of the young people have. So I just want to start with that because it's a big. I turn on the TV. I know you guys too, and this is something that is getting bigger and bigger by the day. So I wanted to address that. Now I want to talk a little bit about career. So I'll tell you a little bit about my story. So I was not always the straight A student, and you don't have to be the straight A student. I was a very entrepreneurial kid. I liked starting my own businesses. I worked to try to get some of the older kids to participate in my business, and I was always starting something new, trying to make money. So now in my career, I'm always trying to get people on board to try to make money in business all over again. So I feel like sometimes you have to look at what types of things you're drawn to, because your passion chooses you. You don't choose your passion. So you have to pay attention. What kind of things do you like watching videos about? What kind of things do you like reading? What kind of conversations do you like to have? What classes do you like? When do you feel like you lose track of time because you're so interested in what you're doing? So sometimes you can get clues early on what you're interested in, and you can use those clues to chart your path. I remember when I was in college, I was a sophomore in college, and I read this book because I knew I liked sales and marketing. And I read this book, and it was full of careers. And I read this description about a product manager, and they said it's like having your own business inside a company, and they talked about all these different things. And in that book it said you need an MBA. So at that moment I said, I'm getting an MBA because that's what it says I need. And they started talking about how much money you can make, and I'm like, oh, this would be great. And so I made a decision at that moment that I would go on to get my MBA because it said that's what I need. I would say if you can get as close as you can to the type of career that you want, talk to people about it, try to find people that are already in that career, see how much you can get down to a day in the life of that career. It's funny because sometimes it gets to a point where there are people that go through their entire schooling. This happens sometimes with lawyers, doctors, etc. My husband, actually happened to him too. He was in engineering, but they get through their entire schooling and then they get on the job and it's not exactly what they thought they would be doing day to day. So you kind of have to get a good sense. What is this job like? What kind of things would I be doing day to day? For him, someone said to him, while he was went to school for electrical engineering, and someone said to him, yeah, and when you're in the lab, and they're talking about the lab, and he's like, well, when do I get out and talk to people? When do I get to present? And they're like, you're probably not going to be doing that. You're probably going to be in the lab working in the lab. And he said, well, I really I want to, talk to people. He's a real people person. So he actually ended up going into technical sales. So he talks to people for a living now. So it's really about trying to figure out where you think you might go. Now, I will say, don't be in any huge hurry. There are plenty of people. I don't actually know many people who are actually working in their field that they studied. So what they got a degree in, what they're doing, a lot of times are different things, but that's okay. A lot of times, even what we'll find is that people that are English majors are really good when it comes to marketing jobs. So you'll find sometimes that some things uh, cross over a little bit, but don't worry about that. It doesn't. You don't have to figure it out the day you step into a college, and you'll figure it out eventually. That's typically how it happens. Now I want to talk about barriers. So first of all, something Chidinma was reading my resume there, and it all sounds really impressive now. But now I'll talk a little bit about where I came from. It's funny, in order to kind of get a sense of what my mindset was when I was in high school, I actually pulled out my old diary. I have it right next to me, and I was like, okay, let me see, where was my mind at back then? And it was embarrassing, really. I mean, it was like every other page was about the guy that didn't call me back, or so it was a lot of things in there, and I'm like, wow, I was worried about things that I barely remember now. They're not as important as I thought they were. But I will say the barrier, the probably the biggest barrier I've had to overcome was I was a teenage mom. I had my son when I was a freshman in college. I was 18 years old. I got a full scholarship. My mom dropped me off at college, and I was already pregnant by, and I didn't know it, by my high school boyfriend that we'd been together for years. And that was my biggest challenge, because here I am. I got a scholarship at this great school, and I'm pregnant. So what am I going to do now? And I decided that I was going to stay in school. I toughed it out. It is the hard way of going through college. I will say that. I'm not recommending it, but obviously it could be done. I remember when I told my mom I wanted to get an MBA, and she, of course, at that time I had my son already, and she was a little surprised. It's like, you're already struggling getting through this. Are you sure that's what you want to do? And I knew it was what I wanted to do. So I just kept going and kept going and kept going. Funny thing about college, it is more about persistence than it is about intelligence. The people who persist and persist, you get a bad grade, you keep going. You have a challenge, you just keep going, you keep going. I didn't know what exactly I would do. I kind of had a sense, even from high school, that I wanted to work in business, but I didn't know exactly where. So you kind of keep open mind and keep moving forward. I'll talk a little bit about some of the thoughts I have when it comes to barriers. First of all, don't focus on the barrier. Focus on what you want. Think about what you want. Talk about what you want. Put pictures on your wall about what you want. And some people have vision boards. I have a vision board. I think and talk and write about what I want. I read about what I want. And that's where because even when I was in college, I will tell you, I was so broke in college. There was one day I had to use pennies to get, I lived in Chicago. I had to use pennies to get on the train. The L is what they call it in Chicago. And I did not have enough money to get back. I said, I'll run into somebody I know. I can borrow a couple bucks and I'll be able to get home. And I took two trains and a bus to get to school every day with my son in Chicago weather. So I was very determined. I felt like I could do it, and I actually didn't feel like I had a choice. I wasn't gonna compromise on my lifestyle long term, so I felt like I had to take advantage of this scholarship, and I had a goal to make a lot of money one day. To be frank, but a little bit more about visualizing this. Steve Harvey has a really interesting story. He basically said when he was in high school, or maybe actually it was grade school for him, they asked them to write down what they wanted to be when they grew up, or when the students grew up. And he wrote down, I want to be on TV. And he felt really good about it. And he stood up. And when his turn came up, he said, I want to be on TV. And the teacher got so upset with him. She said, you're being a smart aleck. You need to take this seriously. And he's like, I am serious. And they called his parents. His mother got upset with him when he got home. And then he talked to his dad, and his dad said, why can't he be on TV? There's nothing wrong with that. And what his dad told him is, hey, listen, write something down that's normal on a piece of paper and give it to that dream killer teacher that you have. And then keep your I want to be on TV paper in your drawer and look at it every morning and every night. And that's exactly what he did. And he said that every year he sent that teacher a new flat screen TV. So I thought that was a funny story. Jim Carrey has a similar story where he wrote himself a $10 million check. He was broke. He wrote himself a $10 million check and he dated it for a few years in the future. And he held it in his wallet all that time. And right before the date that he put on that check, he got dumb and dumber and made $10 million. So, really powerful stuff. So, I encourage you to think about what you want, talk about what you want, write down what you want, because when you do that, there's a power that comes that you start focusing on it and you get excited about it, and it really helps drive and motivate you to get what you want in life. Next one is when you encounter a barrier, expect to overcome it. We get what we expect. We don't normally get what we just deserve. We get what we expect. So you have to believe that you can overcome barrier. That's one of the things that I think separates people when they run into a barrier. If you just stop and you think, "Oh, I'm not going to be able to get past this," um, that's when you don't, because you don't expect it. And I'll say, when it comes to life, it's kind of like a thermometer. You set your thermometer to where you think you should be. That's why they say when someone makes a lot of money and then all that money is taken away from them, they find a way to get back to that because their thermometer is set there. Sometimes you see it also when it comes to weight. Somebody loses a bunch of weight and then it comes back because their temperature is set there. So think a little bit about where your thermometer is set, and make sure that it's set really high. Better to be high and miss it a little bit than to be too low, because you're not gonna go beyond what your thermometer is. Next one is the barrier may be there for a reason. So this is the third one. The barrier for first one is don't focus on the barrier, focus on what you want. Next one is expect to overcome the barrier. And the third one is the barrier may be there for a reason. Can you get stronger by lifting a 1 ounce weight? You can't get stronger that way. Sometimes barriers are there to make us stronger. Second one is it could make sense later on. So it looks like a barrier now, but because you've had that experience, you may be in a better position than someone else to be able to handle that. So the barrier may be there for a reason. It may not be obvious to you now, but it may become obvious to you later. And then the last one is the barrier may be there to point you in a different direction. And my absolute favorite story on this is Oprah Winfrey's story. So Oprah was working as a reporter early in her career, and she was on contract, and they actually wanted to fire her. They did not think she was a good reporter. They told her that she got too emotionally involved with her stories. And they wanted to fire her, but she was under contract, so they had to find something else to do with her for the rest of her contract. So what they did was they put her on the talk show that they had, and the rest is history. So it looked like a barrier because she was getting fired from being a reporter, and that's what she thought she wanted to do. She wanted to be the next Barbara Walters, who was a famous reporter that she looked up to at the time. And here it led her in a much better place, and she's wildly successful. Um, and then when you encounter a barrier, keep the barrier in perspective. Take a long-term view. And it's funny because I started doing this more and more. I say to myself, is this going to matter next week? Is it going to matter next month? Is it going to matter next year? And I start thinking that way, and really things get smaller and smaller when you think of things that way. Things come and things go. When you're in high school, again, I read through my diary, I see how everything was so important at that time. but I didn't remember a lot of those things. Just like you probably don't remember why you were mad about something in second grade. Over time, things pass. I went to my high school reunion and I didn't even remember people. I'm like, who was that? What was their name? So know that a lot of things that you could be going through right now are not going to be things that really determine where you go in life. I mentioned that in high school I was dating someone. I'm looking through, day by day how this guy is treating me. Didn't call me back. Stood me up here. Didn't say nice things to me there, and I'm like screaming at myself, like, "What is wrong with you, Krista? I mean, let this. I mean," and I'm like, maybe I should break up with them. Yeah, you think? Yes, I should have broke up with them way a long time ago. But I will say another thing: I never lose. I either win or I learn. So I was learning what kind of relationship I deserved, and I did make a decision. I made a decision probably, I think, when I was about 20 years old. I made a decision that I was going to marry the best guy I ever met that was an eligible bachelor. So the best eligible bachelor I ever could meet, that's who I want to marry. I started thinking, I need to marry someone who thinks I am the best thing since sliced bread. I need to think he's the best thing since sliced bread. And I wanted to marry somebody that if my son grew up to be exactly like him, I would be thrilled. That's a good kind of barometer. If the guy that if a guy doesn't meet that hurdle, you deserve better. So many people think that oh, I don't know that I deserve this person or that person. You deserve someone who thinks you are amazing, incredible. That's what you deserve. And then if they don't think that, they're not good enough for you because you deserve that. So I just want to say that because after I read through my diary, I yelled at myself, my younger self. I said, and it seemed so big at the time. I said, I'm going to bring this up because sometimes, in the middle of high school, things can appear much bigger than they are. And the other thing I want to say is, I mentioned I didn't get straight A's through high school. I also went to a Catholic school for part of school, and I got detention a lot. I got in trouble because sometimes I was the rebel and I did things I shouldn't have done. So I just want to, anyone who is not where they want to be right now, doesn't matter. Try to figure out where you want to go and how do you get there. And when you have things and you have struggles in your life, first of all, it makes you stronger than the next person. Second of all, it's an awesome story to overcome challenges. I mentioned that I had a Zoom call with our CEO and some of the other African American employees in the company. And one of the gentlemen on the call said, you know what? I was homeless in the Hewlett Packard parking lot. I used to watch, I think it was like right behind the parking lot. He was homeless and he stayed there with his family. And he said, I watched people go in and out of that building every day. And I always wondered what it looked like on the inside. And now he works at the company. And he said he brought his son in one day, and the son said, wow, so this is what it looks like on the inside. You always said you would show us what it looked like on the inside. So to go from being homeless to working at a Fortune 500 company and talking to a CEO and to the CEO through Zoom, quite a journey. And the CEO was really impressed with the story. So again, you got challenges, you've got barriers, you need to look past them to what you want. And if you overcome those barriers, it just makes you stronger. So I think we can open it up for questions now. All right. So let's see.
Yeah,
Do you
I
want
can
to
read
read
them
them off
off.
to
Thank
me,
you so
Chidinma?
much, Krista, for that talk. That was really, really, really inspiring. All your stories, just with your different phases in life and how you're looking at barriers. And I think something that really stuck out to me, honestly, is your perspective on the challenge or barrier you're going through. And thinking about it in terms of like this is something that's happening for a reason. And I love that 1 pound analogy. um you really can't expect to get
Yeah.
stronger, lifting 1 pound, honestly. So you need something that would challenge you,
Mhm.
to push you towards that growth that you need. So that's definitely something I know I try to do normally, just looking at it from a different perspective. So thank you. Let me get to the questions.
No
So
problem.
I know from the top you were talking about, the present, obviously very disheartening state we have with all of the oppression against Black people in this country. And someone had asked, how should we stop this unfair treatment against Blacks in the workplace?
Oh, in the workplace? Yeah. So first of all, I feel like in workplaces, again, I mentioned that this is the first time we're talking about it as a company across the company, which is really, really good. I think we have to call it out when we see something. I think the challenge sometimes we have is it is not obvious, right? It may be a slight that you don't even realize is a slight. What I've noticed though is that with the additional consciousness, other people are calling it out too. So I think we need to have allies. I think we need to explain how we're feeling and open people up to the fact that there is privilege. Privilege is invisible to the privileged. So sometimes you have to explain how it is different when two people walk up to the same counter and one gets treated really well and the other one doesn't get treated as well, or two people walk in a store, one person gets followed, the other person doesn't get followed. So I think we have to educate people that are well meaning, well intentioned about how different things could be for other people, and those people can help champion change as
All right,
well
thank
as
you.
the folks that
Another
are
question says,
experiencing
how do you deal with
the
people that
discrimination.
always underestimate you and don't give you the chance to prove they are wrong?
Oh, okay. You know what? It's funny. I get underestimated at times because it's not that just that I'm African American, it's also that I'm a woman. So when I was a manager at first, I was in my 30s and I had people in their 20s, their 30s, their 40s, and their 50s and their 60s on my team. So I would walk into a room and they would think everybody in that room was the boss except for me, basically. And sometimes what happens is, first of all, you educate people when those things come up. Sometimes I remember one time I was in a negotiation in a class with someone, and he totally underestimated me. And we had this negotiation, and his job was to get as much as he could for it in this exercise, and of course I'm trying to pay as little as I can. And let's just say when he totally underestimated me. And when during the exercise they did this thing where they had someone come by, whisper in his ear, and offer him $1 million for whatever he was selling, and I'm offering a lot lower than $1 million, right? And but he's got an offer for $1 million, and he knows this, I don't. So I start offering, 600,000, 700,000, and he said, well, I got another offer. I said, well, it's a verbal offer, right? I mean, and so he took 700,000 from me instead of the $1 million he was supposed to get from this other person. And so at the end of the exercise, they're writing on the board how much everybody got it for. And when they wrote down the number for him, they looked at him and like, didn't you hear that you had $1 million offer? And he said, well, it's only a verbal offer. And I was like, ooh, but he underestimated me because I knew I could go way higher than that. On my sheet, it said I could have gone to 1,500,000, but of course he underestimated me. And, so sometimes sometimes being underestimated is kind of, you give a chance to shock people, give a chance to get people thinking in a different way. People are surprised a lot of times when I show up. I walk in the room, I'm there to present, and sometimes they're surprised. So, and then they're very pleased when I do well, but it's because they don't expect as much from me, I think, when they initially see me. So so prove them wrong. So that's my advice. Prove them wrong, perform, and
I love
have
that. Prove them wrong
a
and have a
secret
secret
smile
smile.
because
And another
you're
question
educating
says, how
people.
did rereading your diary help you to put things into perspective now?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, because I realized the things I was worried about were very small, and I was taking um, uh, you know, I was taking treatment from someone that that I shouldn't have, and I realized uh, I was letting things get to me that didn't matter that much in the long term, you know. So you know sometimes you have to just go through that stuff, learn it for yourself. But I'm very serious when I say I went to my high school reunion, and it was funny because I would be like, you know, I remember I don't think I like that person, but I have no idea who they are or why I don't like them. So it's like you don't even remember stuff. So you kind of have to take it where, you know, I say when I was young and I was a single mom in Chicago with no money, um, I, um, I was broke, but I was not poor because I always knew I would have money one day. I'm just temporarily broke, you know. So I always had my eye ahead. So have your eye ahead. If somebody's not treating you right, people will treat you the way that you let them treat you. You teach people how to treat you. And when you say, no, this isn't how I'm going to be treated, which I should have done way earlier in my diary, you know, you get your power back and you get what you expect. Like I said before, you'll find someone that treats you the way you expect. And if they don't, and the older I got, the more, gosh, somebody said something to me that was just leaving a little bit off. And I was like, okay, this is the last time we're talking, you know, and I got really particular after a while, and I married a phenomenal guy. But
Thank you.
I learned through
Thank you,
those
Krista.
relationships. You can
So
learn from
another
bad ones and you
question.
can learn from good
Are there
ones.
any misconceptions about women you would like to change? How do you advise we
Hmm.
combat them and communicate more effectively?
Okay. Yeah. So there are definitely things that I would think we need to change. And I'll say things have come a long way in the workplace. They need to come further. But when my mom graduated, she could be a nurse or a teacher or she could be a secretary. And so those were the main things that women did if they had a career at all. So things have definitely changed from that perspective. There are plenty of women at work now. The challenge is a little bit more about how do we get women in leadership positions. And what I will say is that, you know, a guy that goes for a job, he'll go for a job that he's 20% qualified for. If a woman goes for a job, she doesn't even feel comfortable unless if she's 80% qualified, she may not feel comfortable going for that role. So somehow we have to get into a little bit more of a stretch where we go for things a little bit more easily. The other thing I've heard is that when a guy messes something up, he gets over it just like that. He rebounds. Oh, well, everybody makes a mistake and he moves on. And women, I think, beat themselves up a little bit more. So those are the things women could potentially do: take a little bit more risks, think they can do it, stretch for some of those things, you know, lean in, like the book says. So those are some things women can do. But also, I think what needs to happen is there needs to be much more championing for women. I think it's you know, we have different styles. Sometimes that's appreciated. Sometimes that's not appreciated. And then people need to start seeing people as they could be versus how they are. And some of the challenge is that a lot of times you help people that look like you. So when men are trying to mentor someone, they'll mentor somebody who looks more like them, and that just perpetuates things. So we need men to step out and mentor women, and then women who
That's a
make it
great
to high
response.
levels
Definitely
need
need
to
more
mentor
men
other women
allies,
so
I would
we can help each
say.
other out.
And it's funny you touched on sort of like women being perfectionists and, wanting to make sure they're bringing 110% to the table at all times and basically fearing failure. So I think a lot of people do have that fear of failing, because it never feels good. And I mean, we've heard this saying, fail forward, fail fast, and fail often, because it just leads to
Mhm.
constant growth. And I
Mhm.
think this will be helpful for our audience. If you could talk about one of your biggest failures, lessons learned, and how that made you a better person
Mhm.
today.
Okay, great. Sure, I'll do that. And one thing I'll say about that, I didn't really understand what risk taking was all about. And what risk taking is all about is, if let's just say you're playing baseball and you only you only take a hit one time, you try one time versus if you try 200 times. How many, how many times you're going to hit the ball? So sometimes it's just a matter of trying because first of all you get better as you try and try and try, and second of all you're just more you're going to get more hits because you're trying more often, you're trying more things. I remember sometimes in the past someone would get an assignment and it would be a really hard assignment, and I would be like, oh my goodness, I'm so glad I didn't get that assignment. That's really, I don't know how they're going to be successful getting that done. And sometimes the assignment, they would fail, and but they gained an experience. And so somebody would say, "Oh, you need to call Joe because he was on this project and he's got experience with this, and that." And I'm sitting there thinking it's not going to count because he failed. Well, it counts because he gained the experience. Whether you fail or not, you got the experience. No one can take that away from you. So a failure of mine. Um, so I will say when I was in MBA school, I did not get I got an internship. I got an internship at Kraft Foods. And I was so excited. I'm like, oh, this is great. I was in marketing research. And the woman who hired me actually, she didn't pick me. I was assigned to her team. And she made that very clear when I first got there. Yeah, I didn't get a chance to select. They just gave you to me as the intern. Do you at least know Microsoft Office? She's kind of like, do you at least know that? Because I'm stuck with you. Well, I worked hard at that internship, but I sat lost a little bit where I didn't exactly know what I should be doing. She wasn't really giving me a lot of great guidance. And at the end of the summer, I didn't get an offer from that, and a lot of other people did. So in my mind, it was a failure at the time, and I was upset about it. I'm like, well, maybe I should have done this, maybe I should have done that. At the end, it was the best thing that
And that
happened
I
to
was
me,
trying to get
but
off mute.
at the time, it was pretty
So
devastating, and I
yes, I
saw
love that
that
you
as
talked
as
about
a failure.
failure. And I think in the midst of that, sometimes people struggle with staying motivated, especially like you were saying when you don't have guidance. So what would you say is your advice for staying motivated and sharing even how you stay motivated when you're feeling a little unmotivated?
Yeah, so I love reading books. So I read motivational books. I watch motivational YouTube videos. I'll watch Tony Robbins. I will watch some of the other, Stephen Covey, a lot of the motivational speakers and book writers. I'll watch their videos. I'll listen to podcasts, and I'll also talk to people that I trust and I know have my best interest at heart. So those are the things I do. I also keep a journal. They have these 5-year journals that you can keep. And some of you may have seen this, but they're really cool because I could see what I was doing. I'm on the 5th year now. So I could see what I was doing today, last year, all on one page. Last year, the year before, the year before. So I can go back the last 4 years and see what I was doing today. That's the other thing that gives me perspective. I'm like, wow, I was worried about that, I was worried about this or that, and it's nothing now. So that gives you perspective too when you see year after year how things are progressing and developing. I also
Knowing what you
meditate.
know now
I read
and
affirmations,
looking back to your
and
younger
I
self, what is
visualize.
one
So those are
advice
all
you would
things that
absolutely
motivate me.
give, especially because we have a young audience in the crowd?
Yeah, actually, I saw, so that question is very interesting because I actually made a list of what I would tell my younger self, and so I've got a few of them. I'll make it brief, but I've got a few of them. I would have told myself why grades are important. Everybody says grades are important, and nobody looks at my GPA right now, right? It's like I go for actually after your first job, there's not a lot of people who look at the GPA. But why it's important is because the what you back to the muscle, what you learn when you learn how to manage your day, manage your assignments, the discipline that goes into it. It isn't exactly what you're learning. It's kind of the systems that you use to learn because you can leverage those in when you work. I have to keep a list of all the things I'm doing at work. I've got to manage my time. I've got to learn new concepts and I have systems for doing that because of school. So think of it that way. And then on your first job, all they know about you is what's on that piece of paper. So a good GPA is really a good thing. Get into college, get where you're going. So because that's the only thing they know about you, they don't know you personally, so they have to judge based on grades. So those are the reasons grades are important. The importance of habits. A lot of what we do is habits and making sure you understand what your habits are. People say, show me your habits, I'll show you your life, because we are what we repeatedly do. So, excellence is a habit. So, that's a famous saying. You are what you repeatedly do. So, excellence is a habit. So, you have to examine what you're doing, what your habits are, and work to change them. And successful people have higher expectations for themselves. They just decide, it's the thermometer. They decide, this is what I deserve. I work with people I've worked with people in the past at fast food jobs, and I work with people now in Fortune 500 companies making a lot of money. And there's people that are just as smart and bright working fast food as there are that I work with in Fortune 500 companies. The difference is they may not know how to get there, so you can figure that out, especially with YouTube. There's career advice for everything under the sun and the internet. You can kind of figure out what to do. Kind of like when I read that book and it said product manager, you need an MBA. And I was like, okay, that's what I'm going to do. So that's one way of doing it. And then they may not think that they can do it. They may not expect to be able to do it. So raise your expectations. And then I would say I would definitely tell myself to keep it in perspective. A lot of things I worried about in high school just didn't matter. It's not even that they don't matter now. They didn't matter a year later in high school.
And
They didn't
this
matter. So it
question,
doesn't
I
take
would
very
say,
long
is
before
very
that stuff just
interesting.
kind
Would
of
you say
melts
you've
away. You
ever
choose the
been
people
in
that
your
are in
own
your life.
way,
So if the people in your
of
life
just like
aren't the
making
right people,
progress
you
or
can
being
change it.
successful at something, and how did you deal with that?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I've been in my own way. Confidence is more than half the battle, and I haven't always had confidence, and it's always challenging to have confidence in situations that you've never been in before. So that happens all the time because once you reach something, it's like, oh, now I got to go to the next and the next, and that's how you grow. But sometimes it's hard because you're not confident because you never done it before. One of the things I use that has served me really well is I say to myself, I'll give it a shot and see what happens. Hey, listen, I'll tell you, my first house, I didn't have enough money to buy a house. I was like, I'm not sure that I really have enough to buy this new house. And then the gentleman that was talking to me said, well, you get your money back if you don't get approved for the house. And I was like, oh, well, if you'll get my money back, let's give it a shot and see what happens. Guess what? I got the house. First time I became a manager, someone tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, we're interviewing. Would you like to interview for a management position?" And I was like, "Give it a shot, see what happens." When he called me I really didn't think I was going to get it. When he called me for the job, and he said, "Hey, Krista, this is John." I was thinking, John who? I mean, I really wasn't expecting to get the job. So I have repeatedly, when I went to MBA school, I didn't think I had a high enough
Agree, yeah,
test
like,
score to get
what is
in.
the worst thing that
So
could
I said, you know
happen?
what?
I
I'll give it
mean,
a shot and
maybe you
see what
get told a
happens.
no,
And I
but,
got
you
in.
know,
So give it
it's
a
not the
shot and
worst
see what
thing.
happens is really my way of trying to overcome and try to get out of my own way. Because what's the worst thing that can happen? You know?
Mhm. Right. Right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, with the house, I knew I was going to be told no, but I said to
Mhm.
myself, you know
Yeah,
what?
so
They
giving
have
it
to
a
tell
shot.
me
But
why they told me
that's a
no,
great
and then
mindset
I'll
to even
just
have
fix
as
that
well
for next
because
time.
you're
Same thing with
preparing
the
to
MBA.
grow
I was like, they're
already.
going to have to
You're
tell me
already
why they
ahead.
didn't
Like
let
if
me
you
in,
were told
and I'll just
no, you
apply
want to
next
know
year. I'll
why
fix
to
whatever that
improve,
is.
for
But it's
next
just so
time.
funny
So
because I gave it a
I
shot
love that.
and it worked
And
out.
my last question would be I always like to ask this question. Are there any resources? I know you talked about reading books and meditating and listening to a lot of motivational um, things. So, would you say you have any
Right.
resources that you'd like to recommend to our audience if they want to stay motivated and continue to just grow personally and professionally? Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And for the audience, we would send that also, just in case you can't get everything down. We would send that along with
Yes.
the thank you email for attending.
Yes,
So,
I actually
mhm,
wrote down a list
I'll
of
get
a
that from
couple
you.
books that I would recommend. Let's see if I can find that list for you right now. Okay. Okay. All right. So, oh, here it is. All right. So it is. So we got
Hmm.
Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. The Magic of Thinking Big by David Schwartz, I believe. The Secret, and that's actually on Netflix as well. So
Okay.
that's an easy way
All
to,
right.
if you
Thank
have
you.
Netflix.
Those are really all
The
the questions
Power
I
of
had.
Positive Thinking
I
by
definitely feel
Norman
inspired after
Peale.
listening
How to
to you
Win
talk
Friends and
and
Influence
share
People
your
by
point of
Dale
view and your
Carnegie,
experiences
and
with
Anything by Tony
overcoming
Robbins.
challenges, especially being a leader yourself. I think some things that stood out to me is definitely setting expectations for yourself and not being afraid to just try something. You don't have to be 100% ready. Just giving it a shot, like you said. So I think, yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, one other thing I want to leave you with is advice I got from my brother before I went to college. He told me, because when you're in high school, the you have a very strong structure. You have to go to class, and it's very laid out for you. Your parents are there. When you go to college, it isn't as laid out for you. You have the freedom to not go to class, right? And I in high school I was like, oh, of course I'm going to go to class. I go to class now. That's just the way it is. Well, he said, Krista, no matter how tired you are, whether it's go to class. He goes,
Go
I
to
don't
class.
care if you take a notebook, you don't take a pen, if you sit in the back of the class, go to class. And so there would be many days on cold mornings in Chicago. I was like, oh, geez, I don't want to go to class. And my brother was in my head saying, go to class. So I want to be in your head for those of you that are going to
Mhm.
college.
Yeah, no,
Go to
thank
class
you.
because there
And
isn't
I
anyone
would say I
there to
love what you
make you
said
do it.
about finding people,
You
especially
become
for
your own,
those
you have to
looking
parent
to explore
yourself
different
and you have
career
to
paths.
tell yourself,
Just
so
having
go
people
to
you could
class
talk
no
to
matter
already in
what.
that
Even
field
if you
to,
don't take a
get a sense
pen,
of
you
what
don't
it
take
is
a
they do.
notebook,
I know
you don't
that
take a
person
book, you
helped me
sit
a
in the back of
lot.
the
I
class,
call them
go to
informational
class.
interviews, just talking to people. And even in your career seeking mentors, like you were saying, with regards to, women mentoring women, I would say, seeking out mentors, someone that could guide you in that path as well is very, very helpful. But yeah, that was all we had. Thank you so, so
Hmm.
much, Krista, for doing this. This was
Hmm.
amazing. Of course. Yes, yes. Y'all have a good one. Bye.
Well, thank you. Yeah, well, I really enjoyed it. Thanks for having me, and thanks for everybody who joined today.